All right, so let's get started and welcome to the PTC Talks, where we are excited by having Renee and Koen from PTC here for a session on design for service, enhancing product engineering through the digital thread. But first, just a very quick introduction by me. My name is Torbjörn Peterson and I'm the Alliance Manager for PTC, leading these webinars where we invite speakers for some inspiration on digital transformation to see what is possible and how to make things happen. We are running all these webinars on Fridays, 3 times a month, same time, with topics around either manufacturing, services, or engineering. And the recordings of all the sessions are to be found on the registration site. And the agenda for today is first a very quick overview of PTC by myself, and then Renee and Koen will run the show, where they will also touch base on a few challenges, how to address these, and then explain some of the business outcomes. At the end, we're also having a Q&A session, so please keep your questions to the end. You may also put them in the chat, and we will pick them up during the Q&A session. So just a very quick overview about PTC for those who are not familiar with us. We are a global software company with a headquarters in Boston, and we provide market-leading solutions on IoT, augmented reality, PLM, CAD, SLM, and ALM through the digital thread to help companies to accelerate their digital transformation. Now over to you guys, Renee and Koen.
Hey, thank you very much, Torbjörn, for the introduction. And hey, good morning, Koen.
Hi, Renee. So this time we talk in English because I think we had this conversation in Germany, I think 3 months back, wasn't it?
It was, right? Yeah. So maybe before we dive into the topic, we do a brief introduction of ourselves. Yeah. So Koen, if you want to start.
Okay, my name is Koen Jeukens. I currently work for ServiceMax PTC for about 8 years, and before that, for 25 years, I've always been responsible for running a service organization. So, as being responsible for running the service organization, of course, I needed tools, I needed business processes, I needed information. So, consistently with changing technology and changing customer behavior, my demands towards, let's say, a flexible platform which is giving me real time, but also accurate data was very important, because without that information, I basically would be inefficient, I would be blind, I would be handcuffed. So this entire journey with new capabilities of technology, and also in part of the context of PTC, that now as a service persona, I can tap into engineering information, that makes my heart beat faster. And thus we have this conversation together with you, Renee.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, to my person, my name is René Zörfel. I'm based out of Munich in Germany. I'm with PTC since more than 13 and a half years now. I started as a pre-sales business development manager back in 2010 here at PTC. And I have worked with a lot of companies, primarily focusing on actually PLM and how customers can use the PLM and the richness of the data that is all created and managed in PLM, also along the product life cycle, actually. And with the acquisition of IoT and then ultimately also the service portfolios we have, we really had the opportunity to discuss with customers the whole story from when the product left the company, the manufacturer that we usually work with, till the end of the product, the end of life of a product. Nowadays, I'm a global industry advisor, with a focus on the life science industry, actually, and maybe also because of service plays an essential role. It has actually reached a very huge leap in the time when we were all faced with COVID and the pandemic situation. Service became a very important topic in that industry, but also in all the other industries. And with Koen today, we would like to give you a little bit of a glimpse and an idea on how both of the circles that you can see that we draw as a kind of an infinity loop, how both of the sides of the coin in engineering, but also in service, can benefit from each other by leveraging data to assure that whatever has been designed, whatever has been built, whatever has been sold can ultimately also be maintained over time till a product ultimately reaches the end of its life. Yeah. So, and to make it a bit clearer here, when we think about this infinite loop and we look into the green part, which is actually more the digital part that PTC represents, and with the solution we are providing, this is actually when the product is still with the OEM. You could argue even in the phase when you produce it, it's still with the OEM, but then it comes to point in time where the product is handed over to the customer of the OEM, and then it's used and it's spent its life in use at the customer of actually our customers. And we want to talk about how we and you can actually benefit by combining those two circles or those two domains from the physical and also the digital world. And I would like to start with the engineering perspective, right? This is actually also where PTC, and then Torbjörn said that where PTC is coming from. It's actually from the design, from the digital world. And then Koen will more put some light on how the organizations can benefit from a service perspective. So, as everyone knows, the earlier you make a decision in a process, maybe the lower the impact in changing or in evaluating alternatives, and maybe also changing something is better. Yeah. So that said, that's not only true for services and for manufacturing, but it has actually also an impact on the service business. So whenever you start defining a product, let's say the impact you make in the decisions and in the early phases is much better and much more sustainable compared to a change that you have to implement later when the product may have been already being manufactured. That said, all the aftermarket is really a critical component of an enterprise digital transformation strategy. And that, as I mentioned earlier, COVID really has significantly accelerated the pace of change we see, making also clear that the customers' strengths and weaknesses of their aftermarket strategies became obvious, right? Because during COVID, we had also disruptions in the supply chain, and that again led to some challenges that our customer faced during the time. And also what we want to facilitate is really the need for a continuous flow of product data, so that actually every stakeholder that has an influence on the product can concurrently work with the ones that designing the product. And so we would like to extend the use of the richness of the data, and that's data that's managed on PLM, also for the services department. Having that said, we see that our customers, but also PTC, we change the focus also on services and the service lifecycle management. If you could, when you look at the life of a product, the majority of the time the product spent at the place where it's used. Yeah. So the lower time, or the less, it takes less time to engineer, manufacture the product, so it stays with the OEM. It is much more longer in use wherever the product is defined to use. Yeah. And so that said, and having an SLM portfolio, having a focus on services is really relevant, because service leaders need a true partner that also understands how the critical value of service and the overall impact on organizations. And the other thing also to consider is a product usually is designed and engineered once, but it is typically used in multiple variations also at the customers of our customers. So, and there are so many different touch points for service, more than just one singular event. right? So there's then definitely an opportunity to really extend the life of the asset, which make it relevant, and then using also the relevant information, so that you could use the equipment in multiple ways, but you also use the information that the equipment creates in multiple ways to optimize the service, but also ultimately actually optimizing maybe the product as such. When we look into this, and when we speak with service leaders, we see, and also from research, we see that the management of the service lifecycle actually creates really revenue opportunities that companies were historically unable to tap into. And on many occasions, the revenue and the margin contribution coming from service is significantly greater than that coming from the sale of equipment, and therefore extremely vital to any organization that manufactures products. Having said that, considering service aspects while defining the product, or designing then the product, and even when manufacturing the product is paramount. So our idea and our vision is to really expanding or extending the digital thread into the services organization. Because if you could, for instance, consider the work that the field service engineer is doing in the planning of the design of a product, then you build in serviceability into the product design, and you could consider specific aspects of a service engineer, or even when you think about sustainability, even from a reusability perspective, into the product design. You could also increase the visibility between the different disciplines, right? And you allow people start earlier collaborating and executing actually also tasks in parallel, which again might have an impact on the time to market for your product and your organization. You also streamline the transformation between product design and service planning, because you make use of all the rich content that has been created by the designers and by the engineers, and leverage that information, leverage those data in different locations. Also, for instance, in service, imagine you could reuse the 3D data and the 3D information for the when you are maintaining a product in the field. You're also increasing the efficiency in creating downstream deliverables, meaning that you could start earlier, but also you could allow people that work with the data to give early feedback, so that you can consider that while you may simulate or optimize your product. And you have a unified change management, right? So whenever something maybe happened also in the field, and whenever you might have, that could be feedback into the engineering organization, but also whenever you do a change from an engineering perspective, by working on the same data, working on integrated platforms, you give the service people the opportunity to being involved much earlier than concluding a change and then handing it over to the service organizations. That again then might have result in a time delay, and maybe also in the loss of data. Typically, when we look into the service landscape at customers, you see a lot of systems that are somehow involved in defining products, but ultimately also servicing products, right? Starting maybe on the top, you have all the let's say the bigger systems, the enterprise systems that are PLM systems, ERP. You might have asset management systems or content management systems. They are all managing different parts of a product, of an organization, right? Then you have maybe a service parts management solution. You have predictive service parts management, where you combine maybe also machine learning to predict the forecast. You also use service parts management maybe to optimize the inventory you have, and syncing the supply planning with the demand forecasting. You might have a communication layer that is leveraging, it's taking data from remote services or remote serviced equipment to update the different organizations, the different functions, in an enterprise. And then, of course, you have the whole section of service operations, right? Where you have real-time service data, all the service field service execution and planning, incident handling, and so on and so forth. When we augment the PTC part to it and the PTC solutions part to it, then you would actually argue that you would have maybe a Windchill and the PTC Arbor text and Creo for the PLM and content management. But then we enter into the service portfolio we have. We have the PTC Servigistics solutions that are really focused on optimizing how we handle and how an organization handle spare parts. We have a communication layer, which is enabled by ThingWorx. It helps us to bridge the gap between the equipment in the field and the own organization. And then we have the whole set of ServiceMax solutions, which helps us to optimize the field and the field service execution, incident handling, and that's enriched by warranty solutions that helps us to make sure if someone is eligible to being serviced and what the contractual framework would be. So that's more the side of the engineering part. Koen, you might talk about the service perspective of that closed loop.
Yes, please. Well, as I told you in the introduction, I've been running service organizations for 25 years. And what I often notice is as running those service organizations, when the people, if the product is in the field and technicians need to service that equipment, one of the biggest challenge of service people is, what was the plan? Who designed this product? Did the person who designed the product, did he even take into account serviceability considerations? So I've often seen that service organizations, they are a group of magicians. They try to manage uptime of equipment, often in the absence of information. And the conflict behind it, that information is available in your organization, but maybe in a different system, maybe in a different silo. So right now, what we try to do in this conversation, if we know that for service people, when they service a piece of equipment and they service that equipment for a period of, it has a technical life cycle of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they have to maintain the uptime or the output of that equipment over that entire life cycle. And when we draw a kind of picture of how such a life cycle looks like, well, of course, on the left-hand side, you see design, the build, and the sale phase, but only after the installation and commissioning of that product, of that equipment, of that system towards the customer, only after the completion of the installation, then the customer can turn on the switch, then they can start using it, and only then the customer will get output and value. Before that point in time, it's only cost. So you can imagine that having invisibility on the as designed and as built ultimately leads to the as installed. Because I imagine that many of you are designing products in a modular way. And just like René already said, when we sell those products, it's built of modular components configured in a specific configuration for the customer. So a same product might have many different instances and variations for customers. So documenting the as installed is extremely important. You need a system of record for that. And of course, you can inherit the information from the engineering domain. But once you have installed it at the customer, you know this is T is 0. This is the starting point. From this point onwards, the customer starts operating the product. And over that life cycle of 5, 10, 20, 30 years, that product will have multiple touch points. A touch point can be a regular preventive or periodical maintenance activity, either time-based or condition-based. And of course, if it is a connected product, we can, instead of doing it time-based, we can do it condition-based because we're continuously monitoring it. And when it comes to break fix, no matter how much preventive maintenance you do on a product and no matter how much digital is in the product, products always fail. And they fail at the worst moment. But what we try to do with IoT and having access to engineering availability, we try to reduce those unplanned downtimes as much as possible. And of course, we still need to mitigate those situations where we can't mitigate the planning. But the more we invest in information on that asset, we can go from reactive to more proactive and predictive type of service models. Guess what? That's what customers ultimately want from us. They're not buying service from us to mitigate downtime. They want to buy services from us to know we want uptime. We want to know how the product works. And who knows best how the product works? The people who design the product. Now, again, in this picture, what you see is over the life cycle, at a certain point of time, the output of an equipment will drop below a certain threshold, and then you may offer to the customer, shall we do a midlife upgrade? Or maybe in parallel, the engineering department has continuously engineered the product. They created a revision 1, a revision 2, a revision 3. And it's great that if you're from an engineering perspective at a revision 3 level, and revision 3 will be used for all new sold products, but what do you do with your existing installed base? Would it be interesting to tap into your existing installed base, knowing that engineering has a revision level 3, that you can search on the database and proactively go to customers. Dear customer, I see you're still working on revision level 1 of that pump. We can replace it by revision level 3. Guess what? The life expectancy of your product will increase, but maybe this pump is also more energy efficient. Good for sustainability. Maybe it's going to increase the performance of the products. If this is the mindset, if this is the vision of your organization, if you want to manage the touch points over the entire life cycle of a product once it is in the field, each touch point represents a cost and a revenue. And I think Renee already told it, margins on services are typically in most of the organization a bit higher than margins on product sales. So you can imagine if you can manage and tap into these touch points and you have a system of records and you have the tools to work with this, I think you can start tapping into that, well, untapped potential. Can I go to the next slide, Renee? So just one slide. I'm not going to touch everything on this slide, but if I have to explain in service, what do we mean by service lifecycle management? As a result of the previous picture, it starts with asset commissioning. And once the basis has been set, we have documented the as installed, we can have service requests, work orders, we can do all the nifty and fancy stuff in the engineering domain. But look at the pieces with the gray background. Those are all activities executed in the service domain, where the technicians, they need access to the engineering information. And just try to imagine that if the wizards in the service departments have to execute those bullets without having access to the engineering information, they're not efficient, they're not proactive, and a bunch of other things. So in here, you see how ServiceMax with service lifecycle management, with the right-hand side of the infinity loop, it taps into information from the engineering domain. Even once more, and maybe on the next slide, we can say, if we start connecting the worlds, what happens if we start using the information from the engineering domain in service? I already explained in the previous slide, but maybe the next slide is maybe even more important, because this is where we feed back information from the service domain back to engineering. And Renee, maybe you can explain how important it is to have this information back in the engineering domain.
Absolutely, and that's we have a lot of customers and a lot of use cases that exactly are interested. And show what the value is, right? So in project, as I mentioned, and then Koen elaborated also on that, the most time of its life, a product is at the customer of our customers, yeah. And so, but they have designed the product for an intended use, and they have it designed for specific under specific assumptions, right? So what, based on the service data and based on the service execution, engineering really has a huge benefit. For instance, they could understand how the product quality performs, or how the product from a quality perspective performs. what is the failure rate they have, and what does that mean? Is there any, can I draw any conclusion based on the MTBF, for instance, the mean time between failure, to understand what the reliability of parts of the products are? Can I use the data from how the product is serviced, how the spare parts has been replaced, how the performance, the actual performance of an equipment is? How can I use that information maybe to drive innovation, as Kun also just said, right? Is it not only that I innovate from what I know and what I do from what happens in innovation anyway, but can I use data from the equipment to say, hey, that's a behavior I need to change, and that's something where I can drive innovation? Can I also maybe identify what are the spare parts, and is there maybe a change over time? And I have taken maybe different assumption what the spare parts could be, yeah, or what is technical performance. So a lot of those data help engineers actually to drive innovation, to optimize the product, not only for the next generation, but also for the products that are in the field, with, for instance, defining respective upgrade packs, for instance. So that said, to understand not only where the assets are, because that's also for some of our customers a kind of a challenge to really understand where the assets is used, but also to understand under which condition it is used and how they are used, has a huge impact on the efficiency, how an organization is operating. It also helps maybe to increase the revenue, because you make sure that you have the spare parts or revenue stream added. It also has an impact on the social responsibility, in particular on environmental footprint and the sustainability. And it might also reduce the risk for the operator, but also for the organization that has brought that product into the market. Yeah, so there are multiple dimensions. I don't know if you want to add something. Otherwise, I think we could also go into the question and answers.
Maybe just one more thing. What I like so much in the infinity loop, for me, the left-hand side, the engineering, that for me as a service persona is plan. This was the plan of the engineer. The right-hand side of the picture is actual. The product is in the field. So I had a plan from an engineering perspective. I have an actual in the field. And as a manager, I love two numbers. I always compare plan against actual. And if they are aligned, I typically say I'm doing a great job. But if they are out of sync, this is where, from an organizational perspective, I need to drive my processes to learn to be more efficient. The 6 boxes on this screen, the icons on this screen. And if I have the visibility of both, if I connect them together in this digital thread, in this infinity loop, I think I'm pretty much prepared for whatever will come in the next decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Renee and Koen, for sharing all your interesting insights here around the services. So now open up the Q&A for any questions you might have to Renee and Koen. So please raise your hand and we will unmute you, and you will be able to use the microphone. So I think anyway, I had some questions here. So let's get started. So great that you're actually talking about the world of engineering and services, but if it's all around logic, how to connect it, what is normally holding organizations back to actually act upon it?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, what I've learned in all my years in service, there is so much inherent value in service, but for 25 years, it feels like preaching to the choir. and if you tell a story like this, it all seems so logical. And what I want to tell the audience, I understand from a technology perspective, technology is so powerful today that technology is no longer the excuse, between quotes, not to do it. But we understand that corporate politics and organizational design and change management, that is the big issue. But again, here, I think it all starts with, if you embrace the concept and if you can bring service and engineering together and say, well, if engineer is contemplating the purchase of a new tool, please include the service people in the selection of the tool, and also the other way around. Because if you make a tool selection in your silo alone, then I think you will build in inefficiencies and interfaces.
Thanks a lot, Koen. We had one question here also from Pratap. Maybe you could, speak up. I think, you should be muted right now.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice discussions on giving us a very detailed idea of how the product can be enhanced. The product is not the all the things we require. The service is must for that, for the longevity of the plants and the best advantages of the processes also, and how the engineering plays a vital role to keep it alive in terms of how the services and the product get together. And so the main objective is the customer benefit should be to fetch the real value. So my first questions regarding to this is that prescriptive model is definitely a must one, and it's a safeguards before the money, energies, resources, productions, and we say it as a downtime. Now, when we ask for the services to the customer, so we the valuable services, we would like to deliver the services on the top of the product. So once when we say to the customers would like to definitely ask us, and they are asking that this kind of the prescriptive things where it has been witnessed, and how much money is saved before this kind of downtime occurs to the situations of the similar cross reference of these customers or the competitions. That is the first question. Second question is the engineering and the bridge between the product and service. The engineering is a very vital thing. I would not like to take the name of, but you can say it's a world's reputed technology provider. Can you imagine that the product purchased by the customers through the tech consultancy or engineering technology solution provided like us, the product just installed 4 years back, and this is a world's reputed technology provider. The basic miss of this product is that that product doesn't have even RS-485 or TCP/IP connectivity for the online connectivity for the service deliverable. And now the cost of that things, due to lack of this basic engineering on this leading technology, world's reputed technology provider, the cost of these things, this implementation is 3 times higher than the cost invested 4 years back of the real product implemented. So how to come out from that? And I would not like to give the name of it. He is the world's leader in the technology provider.
Thanks a lot, Pratap.
Yeah.
And these are not the one thing. These are the 120 installations among the 140 total installations. 120 installations are from this technology provider, and these are the simple things. Simple miss has been done by this. So this is how the engineering will play a vital role. So I would like to know from all 3 of you. Thank you. This is my questions. These are my questions.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Can you
Pardon?
Can you start, René?
Yeah, so I must say I had some difficulties in getting the core of the questions actually, right? So but maybe to pardon?
2 questions. First questions was the service deliverable, but witnessed by the customer when he asked that this downtime, what you are saying that it's a prescription model, how the downtime has been saved before implemented with the similar kind of customers or competitions or cross reference. That was my first question. So then if he is convinced, then and then he will go to put the value based service model. And second questions, I said the example of the engineering miss. Yeah. So I think now clear both the questions, or should I repeat again?
Yeah. I can take the first one on downtime. So yes, for the downtime, there is a fundamental change or concept you have to have in your mindset as an organization when you sell your products. Are you, as a service organization, are you mitigating downtime or are you selling uptime? And this is from two ends. This is from a seller perspective and a buyer perspective. So one of the companies I work for is Bosch. Bosch is selling a lot of technology for companies, but we had two types of buyers. We had technical people who simply bought our products and technology as a commodity. And they said, we have our own internal experience and we will try to maintain the equipment ourselves. And only when it fails in a reactive mode, we will go to the OEM and then you fix it. Okay, we had the second type of customers who said, Bosch, you are designing very complicated technology. We have no inclination to build capabilities or training for our own people to understand how it works. Please make sure that the equipment is running in an uptime mode for us. So you can imagine for the second type of customer, it's much easier to sell subscription-based, uptime-based, performance-based type of contracts. But for the first category, if they say, oh, we are smart enough to know how to do it ourselves, we will never buy a subscription-based or availability type of service contract. We will only want to have access to the user manuals. We want to have access to spare parts. And for very complicated stuff, we will call you. So we have to make this distinction because it's not a one size fits all. But especially for the second type of customers, if they can explain, if a customer can explain to me, the cost of downtime is X and it is this important to me. If I, as a sales persona, if I know those two pieces, I will be able to get a contract out of that customer. If I don't know how important my product for a customer is, then it's very difficult to sell those type of services.
Yeah. And maybe to add from an engineering, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
So I think thanks for. I think you touched rightly what we are coming across. Absolutely, the second type of customers. So let me tell you that we approach in this way that 95% uptime. Okay. For the so that's but for the first type of customers where they would like to witness the things on the downtime basically. So that for that reason we need to give the real classic examples on that part, and we need to bring and we need to attach with the value how much they save with the reduction in the downtime or no downtime at all. So that was the things. And thanks. I think that clicks rightly actually. Yeah.
Maybe the leeway for you to Rene to approach it from the engineering perspective. The good news for all OEMs is products are only getting more complex. That means that customers can do less and less. So for me, the fact that we have more complex products makes it easier for me as a service persona to sell service contracts. But I can only sell them if the engineering persona apply design for service, because if they engineer complex products, but they don't think about service, I might be able to sell the service contract, but I might never be able to be efficient in delivering it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then even from an engineering perspective, I think there's a very important thing to consider in my view. What we learn is also where does the company want to go, right? As the OEM. So is it really something that they consider having that focus on service, and maybe also considering a shift in their business model, right? Imagine you don't want to sell anymore a machine, but you want to sell the outcome of the machine or the performance of the machine, or whatever it could be. You cannot do that without any let's say implementations of technology into that machine. And that's something also that you need to consider. And again, it comes to the point that we made earlier, is you need to think even from a design perspective from the end, right? What is the business model as an organization wants to have, and that then ultimately defines what capabilities you need to have from an engineering perspective being built into that equipment, so that you can leverage that, right? And the other thing then also, even from a service and engineering perspective, if you think about considering the let's say as Koen showed on that curved slide, let's say an upgrade to a product, right? Even that needs to be considered from a requirements perspective. Again, from the end, is that something that service would benefit from? Is that something that the customer would benefit from? And how could I integrate some new capabilities into an existing product? And where is the fleet of products where I can deploy those changes on?
Yeah, good addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. I think the upgrade initiatives you can take care. I think that's what we initiated. Rather than waiting the customer to be reactive, we interacted and proactively now chase for that. I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
What a nice discussion. I like that a lot. So time is unfortunately running out a little bit. So many thanks everyone for joining. And of course, a special thanks to you, René and Koen, for sharing all of this information for us here. So with that, I hope to see you back already next week for a session about the new era of digital transformation, how a priori and PTC drive measurable impact. So with that, stay tuned and have a fantastic weekend. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.